So plug-in solar is now legal in the UK, and so many homeowners are getting super excited. Finally, they've got access to be able to generate some of their own renewable energy. So people are buying cheap solar panels off eBay, on the second-hand market, all over the place. They're slinging them up all over their homes, their balconies, their gardens, trying to generate as much solar energy as they can. But there's a huge problem that nobody is talking about, and that's what actually happens to the electricity when it's generated. Let me explain. When you're not at home, that's when the sun's shining, that's when your solar panels are generating electricity, but you're not there to use it. So although there's this base level of electricity that most homes use, that's a very small amount of energy, and you're not going to save a huge amount by covering that from your solar. The big things that you really want to cover that use a lot of electricity are mostly used outside of the normal solar generation window. So here's the issue. It's 11:30 in the morning, the sun is beautifully shining into my garden, on my fence where I might put some solar panels, but nobody's at home. We're using barely any electricity in the house right now. So what would happen to all of that electricity?
Ooh, spider. There you go, get out of the way. Run to the fields. Okay, now that we've got rid of that spider.
Let me illustrate how this works. This is a UK meter box, which includes a meter, a main isolator switch and a fuse, and that fuse just protects the supply running into your house. Now the meter is what measures the electricity, and normally it's measuring what you're pulling in from the grid, because you're consuming electricity in the house, and anything that you're pulling in from the grid gets measured. But electricity can flow the other way. If you're generating more electricity in your home than you're actually using, it's a bit like a bucket of water. Once the bucket is full, any excess water that you keep adding just overflows over the edges. And in this case, it overflows to the grid. So rather than the power coming in like this into my house, the energy is actually being sent out through my meter, down through this main fuse, through the main cable supplying my house, back to the grid. But the problem is, I can't get paid for this because it's a plug-in solar system. I've got the most shonky meter box ever. I don't know how they got away with this as it's a new build house, but the meter box is completely knackered. This is just a clamp meter, it's reading the current. So I'm currently using 1.8 amps in the house. And if I do a simple calculation using Ohm's law, 1.8 times 230, 414 watts. That's our background load. So that means that if I was plugged in now with a kilowatt of solar panels, and I could push 800 watts into my house from those solar panels, half of that electricity would be being exported to the grid right now and not being used. So let's talk about how a typical day's usage might happen in a home like mine. My wife and I are both out most of the day. Around 5 o'clock, we come home. The oven goes on because my wife Lisa, she's an amazing French cook. She makes a beautiful dinner for us. We might boil the kettle, make a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee going. In fact, the coffee machine does usually go on very early in the morning as well, because I'm an early riser. I get up about 5 a.m, make myself a coffee about 5:30 a.m, and often that's before the sun is shining. Throughout the evening, we'll be watching TV maybe, we'll be running the air conditioning if it's a little bit too hot when we get home, just to cool the house down. So in reality, for most of the day, the solar is going to be coming in to the house, not much being used, a lot of it going out to the grid. But then when you get back home and you're pulling a load of power, it's going to come back from the grid and you're going to have to pay for it. Based on all of these factors, many homeowners conclude that solar simply isn't for them and discard the idea. But there's an important component that they aren't taking into consideration. Battery storage. Yes, battery storage is the missing piece in this whole equation. Why? Because it gives you somewhere to store that excess solar energy when you're not able to use it straight away in the home. Whereas before you would be exporting anything that you can't use, now you've got a battery to store that power in. So how does it actually work? Well, the solar is constantly generating when the sun's shining, right? But your usage might change. One minute you might be using 10 watts in the house, the next minute you might be using 500 watts if some devices have been turned on. And the solar generation does not always exactly match your usage. So the battery sits in the middle as a kind of buffer that basically matches your usage by measuring what you're using in the house and then outputting just the right amount of power that you need in your home at any one time.
So imagine, for example, you're generating 500 watts from your solar panels, but you're only using 100 watts in the house. Rather than 400 watts being exported to the grid, suddenly you're able to charge your batteries at a rate of 400 watts. And after an hour of charging your batteries at 400 watts, that's going to enable you to store 400 watt hours or 0.4 kilowatt hours of energy in your battery. But then you turn something on in the house and suddenly you're using more than the solar is outputting. Then normally you'd be pulling power from the grid to top that up, except now you don't, because your battery is sitting in the middle, taking up that slack and outputting exactly what you need in the house. Can you see then why a battery is such an essential piece in this whole solar plug-in puzzle? It's really the only way to get the best out of a plug-in solar setup. It's also safer because any surplus, instead of stressing your home's wiring, etc., gets stored in the battery and then the battery absorbs it and discharges as you need it in the home. It also reduces the strain on the grid, which in some countries could be a game changer, because in places like the Netherlands, for example, you actually get fined if you export power to the grid. Now, the other super important thing when it comes to battery storage is that at night, when you're using a lot of your energy, the sun is not shining. That's where storing some of that excess solar energy during the day in a battery enables you to then use that battery energy overnight to run various things that you're using in your house when the sun is not shining. That then massively increases the self-consumption of your solar. So whereas before you may have only been using 10% or 20% of the solar energy you were generating, now you can potentially use 100% of it because you've got that battery storage. All of this together allows you to get the best return from your solar system. Whereas before the solar panels might barely pay for themselves, now they really will with that battery storage element included. So now that we understand the concept, let's look at how it might work in the real world.
This is the Anker SOLIX Solarbank 4 E5000. So this is a 5 kilowatt hour battery, which means that it's pretty much big enough to cover most of the background use of a normal house. Things like lights, electronics, your fridge freezer, all of that stuff will slowly pull away at this battery capacity. And for a lot of homes, it'll take the edge off a lot of your usage. It's plug-in ready, which means it's super easy to install. It's got 4 individual MPPTs, which means even if your solar panels are facing different directions, you'll still get the most generation out of your system, and it's perfect for awkward setups. It also has a 2,500 watt dedicated off-grid power outlet, which means that if you get a power cut, it will automatically switch over and power that outlet within 10 milliseconds. So it's perfect for running things like your fridge and your router to keep yourself online or your beverages cold, even when you've got a power cut. Now, the great thing about this system is it's expandable. So you've got a port underneath here and you can basically stack it on top of other battery modules, up to 30 kilowatt hours of storage with this system, which is pretty impressive. It's fully compatible with plug-in solar, and it's got a warranty of 10,000 cycles, which means it's covered for nearly 15 years of daily use. Now, given that a battery stores electricity, how else could it help?
Well, that's where time of use tariffs come in. You see, in this world of electric vehicle charging and smart meters, there are so many smart tariffs available, some of which allow you to use cheap rate electricity at certain times of the day. For example, some energy providers give you a window of 5 hours overnight when electricity is much cheaper. Now imagine if you could store some of that cheap rate electricity and use it at times when electricity is more expensive, like during the day or at the peak time, normally between 4 and 6 p.m. when everyone's plugging stuff in and cooking their dinner. Imagine if you could use that cheap energy that you've stored in your battery rather than paying for expensive energy from the grid. Well, this is a real-world use case for plug-in battery systems. For example, the system that we've spoken about today enables you to set schedules, connect to time of use tariffs, so that you can charge your battery on cheap rate electricity, particularly in winter when the sun is shining less and you're maybe not able to fill the batteries from your solar panels alone, and reduce your overall cost per kilowatt hour of energy down from maybe 30 pence per kilowatt hour down to 5, 7, 8 pence per kilowatt hour, depending on what tariff you're on. So let's look at how this might work in the real world and how much you might save. Say, for example, you are on a cheap overnight tariff like Octopus Intelligent Go. It gives you a slot from 11:30 p.m. until 5:30 a.m. every day, where electricity is a lot cheaper. On average, it's roughly about 8 pence per kilowatt hour at current rates versus about 29 pence per kilowatt hour for the normal day rate. So how much would you save if you filled up a 5 kilowatt hour plug-in battery storage system every night on that 8p rate instead of having to use power from the grid at a rate of 29p? Well, we've crunched the numbers for you, and it's quite interesting to see what they say. So every night, charging your 5 kilowatt hour battery storage would cost you about 40 pence instead of paying £1.31 every day to use that energy at the normal rate. That means you're making a net saving of 91 pence every day by cycling that battery, charging it up on the cheap rate and using that power throughout the day. That adds up to £283 per year just by cycling the battery without taking into consideration generating some of your own solar energy. So then, when you combine plug-in solar panels into this system, that's where it gets really interesting. If you combine it with solar self-consumption, you're looking at around £445 per year of savings from a plug-in system like this. And if you add even more panels, say 4 500-watt panels, you could save up to £770 a year, which gives you about a 3-year payback on the entire system. So imagine how cool that would be to wake up every morning knowing that you've charged your battery on 8 pence per kilowatt hour energy when your neighbour next door is paying 29 pence for their energy. If I wanted to charge this up on cheap rate electricity, it's got a charge rate of 2,500 watts, which means within 2 hours I could have fully filled this 5 kilowatt hour battery from cheap rate energy. Slower charge rate batteries won't let you charge up in time, so charge speed is an important feature to consider. But there's a problem. When using this as a plug-in setup, it is limited to 800 watts discharge to discharge through the plug into your house electrics. Now obviously that's for safety reasons, and they've chosen 800 watts for a reason, probably because it's a limited amount of power that avoids potential risks that might be there if you're pushing more power into a circuit. But you do have to take that into consideration, because what it means is if you're turning on a 3 kilowatt kettle, 800 watts of that is going to come from your battery, but you're still going to pull the remaining 2,200 watts from the grid. So any heavy loads that pull a lot of power instantaneously aren't going to be fully covered by a system like this that's simply plugged into your socket circuit. But that 800 watt limit is not the end of the world, and the reason is that over an 18-hour period, which is that period outside of the 6-hour cheap window that you would normally be paying full rate electricity, for a 5 kilowatt hour battery you'd only need to be using 277 watts constantly in the house to drain that battery from fully charged to 0% charge at the end of that 18-hour window. And 277 watts is not a lot. And the reality is, all of these plug-in battery storage systems are scalable. So you could start with a small 5 kilowatt hour system, and if you find that it's running out halfway through the day and you need more storage capacity, you can easily just add more battery modules to give yourself enough capacity to last throughout the day. And that's only factoring in charging up on the cheap rate overnight and not generating any solar throughout the day. The reality is, during the summer months and when the sun is shining well, even in winter sometimes, you'll be generating enough solar energy to keep topping up the battery so that you're not going to be consuming fully from that battery throughout the day. And hopefully you'll be left with enough capacity at the end of the day when the sun goes down to run your property overnight until the cheap window starts again. So who is plug-in solar actually for? Well, let's talk to the team and see what they think. So Tom, who do you reckon is the ideal candidate for plug-in solar?
The ideal candidate for someone for plug-in solar would be someone with limited roof space.
Any sort of person that's renting.
People in rented properties and ones that can't afford rooftop solar.
Anyone living in a flat, obviously can't get solar for a flat unless the landlord does it.
Anyone who rents, or people who have camper vans and go on holiday in the camper vans maybe.
Would it be suitable for where you live?
Yes.
My new house, no, but my old flat would have been yes, because we had a balcony area, so that would have been actually quite handy.
Unfortunately, don't have a camper van, but we do rent, so yeah.
We rent, so the basic calculations, it's sort of save 300 quid if we're able to get on a sort of cheap EV tariff.
Better than a kick in the teeth.
Definitely.
Most people shopping for plug-in solar spend hours looking at different solar panels, but I hope after today you'll ask a different question. What actually happens to my electricity after it's generated? Because that's the decision that will have the biggest impact on how much you actually
actually save. And you'll probably come to the conclusion that this is the best first step into the plug-in world. And if you want to see a full review of this, make sure you subscribe and comment below to let us know.